even though there were other ones buried.
But to be fair, if Bennett had been on the coffee, he wouldn't have gotten any advantage. So it's not like it was worth it in the long run.
Exactly.
And I don't know, Bennett, how much you wanted those donuts. So I guess we'll just,
I would have waited for an advantage too, Bennett. So I don't blame you.
It's the right move.
Well,
we're live.
guys, we are live. I thought our conversation was so entertaining that we needed to share it with the masses. Guys, welcome to the Survivor New York Veterans vs. Contenders recap podcast here in the Live Reality Games Network. We got a part 1 of episode 10 because they texted me and they said, please, can we have our own episodes? And I said, you know what? I'm so nice. And I love talking about this season so much that I will let you guys both have individual episodes. Joining me today, we have, first of all, the host, creator, the everything of Survivor New York. It's Chris Lord. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited. Oh my God. My whole life is surrounded with Survivor New York right now. I can't not think about it.
Yes,
It'll
I have
never
had
leave me.
multiple stress dreams about Survivor New York as we approach the new season. But you know who doesn't stress me out? This guy. It's Brian. Brian, we finally got you on the podcast. What is going on?
Finally.
How are you?
Yes, I'm sorry I had to bail, but hey, you guys got Alex as like a replacement. I don't think that's so bad. It could definitely have been worse. I'm doing quite well. And I'm just excited to talk about this season. I'm excited to talk to Bennett.
It's going to be a great day / evening. It's 9:00 at night. But Bennett, welcome to the podcast. Here you are, your very own episode. How are you doing?
I was saying I have been waiting since like episode 2 to come here and spew all of my thoughts, and we're going to be here for 5 hours, so everyone get ready.
Oh, no.
No. All right, so...
But I do appreciate you guys giving each person their own time to kind of chat, and the fact that you're doing 3 of these in, 4 nights is insane, but we appreciate it very much, so thank you.
I am so glad to not only have you guys be very willing to make all the time. I had like a whole scheduling sort of like, I needed to sit down and like meditate with a schedule to like figure everything out. And it was awesome. Everyone is super flexible. And I love that we are here today to talk about this episode because I actually think that there is a lot in this episode. We think that this is a very self-explanatory episode, but I actually think there's a lot more to it, and we're going to get into all of it. And Billy says, not the exposed brick in the background. Okay. Billy, don't be jealous of our exposed. I'll go to my living room.
I'm looking at it too. Ben, is this your apartment? Because it's like beautiful. Like, I don't know.
Do you want to? So I have this horrific overhead lighting, and so I had to jerry rig. This is the not so nice area of the apartment that you don't see. So don't think that I live in.
I like it.
There is nice exposed brick, but it is not luxury. So.
Sure. Well, everyone is here to say that your lighting has done you very well in this moment.
Okay, but can I say, everyone's saying how hot Bennett is, but how come on Survivor New York you never wore that tank top?
Okay, so
asking the real questions here.
Talk about actually, and tell me if I'm getting ahead of myself. I am the only person, as far as I know, who has been criticized for what they wore on Survivor New York. One, Survivor New York was not going to be a cardio-heavy event. And everyone's like, you wore jeans. I can't believe it. If anything, I felt like I wore the jeans because there already, apparently, was a perception that I was some sort of like king athlete, which is hysterical because like Davey, who knows me very well, we played on the same dodgeball league. He knows I have no hand-eye coordination. I can lift things up and put them down, and I can run okay, but like if you slow down and look at my form, it's not great. But I wore jeans because I thought like I'll get chewed up by mosquitoes at night. I don't want to risk that. And people read me for that. So I'm like, if I had worn a tank top, it would have been like, well, he's showing off. So I'm like, what did you guys want me to do? Like, I just didn't know. But
wear a tank top.
I have to say also, I feel like the only contestant where everybody went, oh, that really aggressive straight white man, and then you're like, well, the amount of Jasmine Masters that you quoted in the season, I can't believe people didn't figure it out beforehand. But this, I think one of the highlights of this season is just you as a character, and I mean that because like you just come across in so many ways to so many people, and everybody makes all these judgments about you, but they're never really right. And they're always kind of off base. And I find that so funny. And I'm so glad that we get to talk to you to sort of like clear everything up that's going on from this season. Everybody's delusions about you.
But I also, and I will, we'll get into it, but I also think a lot of the perception after watching it back, it's been very eye-opening for me because I watch myself and I'm like, no, I kind of get it. Like I see where they're coming from in many situations, not every situation, but in many situations. And so, yeah, it's interesting, but we can get into it.
Well, talk to us about getting into Survivor New York. I know that you're friends with Davey, and I know that you guys. You also are friends with Louis, and like I want to know what sort of prompted you to apply for Survivor New York in the first place.
Yeah, so Louis, Davey, and I all went to college together at a small school upstate called Geneseo, and the way Davey and I met, actually, and I don't know if we shared specifics around it. So I was an RA in an all freshman building, and I was running a live game in the building, a live Survivor game. Over a period of a semester, we did 2 seasons with all the freshmen. And at first I remember setting up the game and thinking like, no one's going to want to apply for this. I'm like the only Survivor nerd here. And like some of the kids on my floor would come and watch with me on Wednesday nights, but we're kind of becoming new fans to the show because they hadn't watched it since like season 1.
Yeah. Do you know what era you were watching in? Like what seasons were airing?
That would have been, I'm going to age myself now, but that would have been like Nicaragua.
Wow. Classic.
The dark ages of Survivor. So, all of a sudden there was one day I had put up a sign-up sheet on my door and like to my surprise, all these people filled it out and people wanted to apply. But the thing was you had to live in the dorm to apply. One night I'm in my dorm room, I got a knock on the door. I open the door and there is someone standing there with a laundry basket and a blanket over his head. And I just see these legs. And I was like, hello? And I'm like looking at the legs and I'm like, I don't recognize who this person is. And come to find out, it's Davey. He reveals himself and he's like, I was wondering if I could sign up for this. And I asked him, I was like, do you live in Daga? He did, or Daga was what we called it. The building's name was Onondaga. He said no. And I was like, okay, like, really sorry, because he really wanted to play, but he didn't live in the dorm. And like the rule was you had to live in the dorm. It was specific to that building. So I said, like, if we do a second season and you can get yourself swapped into the building via Res Life, you're welcome to sign up. And he literally, like, I think Davey would have to come in and like fact check me on this, but I think it was within like 2 months he transferred into the building, and like the rest was history. He came out with like some of my friends who were seniors in college at the time. He was like a little baby freshman, and like certain people in our dorm, of course, as an RA, you don't want to bring your residents out, but like Davey was cool. Like Davey has been a close friend. He's like my sunshine. I love Davey. And it didn't really come out in the game, and we didn't really see it on the show because we didn't get to interact much, and we were, I think, both very nervous about weaponizing that friendship too much, and at the same time too, we're both just such huge fans of the game that we did want to play our own games and didn't want to like disrupt the other person's game. So it's interesting how that panned out. But yeah, I've known Davey for years. I've known Louis since Geneseo, and we've all like spent premiere parties together, watching at my apartment before there was like, we knew about this live game community. And then of course Louis did this, told us about it, and we just had to sign up. So that's how we got involved.
Amazing. I also love that you say like a small college in New York, as if like Chris and I like are not like SUNY system. Like
we already know about. I know that college very well. I had no idea you went there.
Like, come on, let's go.
That's so funny.
People out of state that have no idea what it is.
Well,
okay, like Brian wouldn't know. Brian wouldn't know, so it's good. Brian knows now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Brian, I want to talk to you about this season so far. What have you thought? And I guess like in particular, we have Bennett here. What's been on your mind now that Bennett is voted out of this game?
Well, certainly disappointed to see Bennett get voted off. We played in the sequester together. We both got taken out super early, but we got to hang out in the losers lounge.
Yes.
So, and then he came back in and almost won. So I knew Bennett just very little bit from that game. So I was rooting for him, of course, but I've enjoyed the season quite a bit. Obviously I watched Survivor Buffalo, and it appears no one on this cast did, because you would think people would go after Emily. She's so good, but you know, she's doing what she always does. She's so good at Survivor. So that's been kind of fun too, to be like, is anybody going to recognize her? Does anyone know her reputation? What's going to happen here? We'll see. But
I'm playing the timeline game in my head.
I think actually that the timeline was that I don't think it had aired yet.
Oh, it hadn't aired yet.
Yes, because I played it with Emily and Sarah in April, and then a lot of them applied to Survivor New York because of me. and me obviously never not talking about it. And then they joined in. But yeah, it is very funny because
tricky.
I do think it is like something that is really tough to kind of like you don't know these things, like especially like Bennett and Davey, you guys really hid your relationship well. And I think it is really interesting because something that Billy talked about last week is he hinted at it, but the Sarah and Emily relationship really took hold, and they have really started to work together in a way that is unexpected from everybody. And there was something similar with you and Davey this season, and I want to know what your thoughts were like going into the game, because I know that you guys must have thought about it, like even separately, just been like, what do I do? How do I talk to this person? What if we're on the same tribe? And we didn't put you on the same tribe for that exact reason. Talk to me about your thoughts going into the game with Davey.
Yeah, so I would like to say that we weren't obsessive or fixating on it for months leading up to it. But
Yep.
We absolutely were. Every time we hung out, we were like, how are we going to do this? And we always like bounce ideas off each other. But going into it, I remember we took the Metro North train up. And there was a conversation on the train where he had shown me texts from his siblings, and his siblings were all, and I love Davey's siblings if you love Davey, his siblings are amazing. But they were all like, you better cut Bennett the first chance you get. Like, and I was like, there are 16 other people playing too. They should be rooting for me at least a little bit. But I told, like, Davey and I had both said, like, if one of us gets to the end and the other is on the jury, like, I'm voting for the person who played the best game. Like, both of us, I think, loved the game so much that there was that respect for the game up front. And then the other thing was, and it was kind of unspoken, but like everyone who's a fan of Survivor knows there are certain points in the game that feel like those milestones, right? And so there's the swap and then the merge, and like as friends, like if we were in a pre-merge situation and had been on the same tribe and someone was trying to target Davey, it would have been really difficult for me to agree to vote Davey out. But I think both of us had the mentality, and I'm very thankful that he had this mentality too, because you can see that he could have had the opportunity to advocate to take me out, I think, at the merge, I think at TJ's boot as well. And he really stuck his neck out for me.
Yeah.
And so I think there's kind of, but it was a little bit unspoken. There was no agreement of like, we're going to get to the top 5 and then it's fair game, or we're going to get to the top 6 and it's fair game. But we did get off the Metro North together, and Billy was sitting right there.
Here he is to tell you.
That's hilarious.
So I
That's
started
so
talking
funny.
to a few people.
God.
I stalked Venmo like crazy and was
Yeah.
sending Davey names of people. And Billy actually had played on a kickball league in Astoria with a friend of ours. And this girl texts me and goes, there's this guy here who is screaming that he loves Survivor and he's doing this thing upstate. Is that what you're doing? And I was like, absolutely, please give me his details. So I knew who Billy was going in. We get off the train, he's sitting right there, and I was like, oh shit, we're gonna get found out. So we did like this like quick like break away from each other, and then Chris put us in separate cars or like whatever. I can't remember how that worked out, but we were very much on high alert about anyone finding out about us. And of course, like lo and behold, there were three other pairs in the game, 2 other pairs, Matt and Kira, Emily and Sarah, and then
you and Bennett and Davey, I would say, and then I would say Kai and Emily F to an extent as well.
makes sense.
True.
Yeah. Also, I have to say, the more that we talk about like the social dynamics that go into the train pickup, the more I think I should just bring a camera and film it, because it's like it's hilarious to hear these stories back and be like, oh, seems like I should have been there to like record everybody faking it with each other.
So funny, because I remember picking up Bennett, and I remember I think Jordan or Alex was driving the other car, and I randomly decided to put Bennett, Andrea, and Marilyn in my car, not realizing that they were all going to be on, the blue tribe together. And I was like, shit. As soon as they all got in the car, I was like, damn, I made a mistake. But I was like, I couldn't go back. They already left. And I was like, I have challenge stuff in my trunk. I was like, all of you guys need to get inside the car first, leave your stuff outside, because I got to put it in my trunk, because I had the first challenge right in my trunk.
Yeah.
And they went in, there was like this little awkward like conversation trying to happen between them. But I was like, all right, you guys have to keep it like really cool or be quiet, blah, blah, blah. But it was really awkward, like 30-minute ride home.
When you split up the teams and I found out they were on my team, and I don't know if Marilyn and Andrea felt the same, but I felt like instant relief of like, these are like, I had talked to Kyle a bunch the night before. I had talked to Kai a bunch the night before. And then Andrea and Marilyn had those like first moments together in the car where like everyone's a little bit like on edge and like a little cagey about what's about to happen. and I was like, this is the perfect. I was so excited when we split up the tribes, but little did I know it was an error on your part to let us all into.
So Brian,
Yes.
this episode in particular, because I think that we see something. Oh, look at Marilyn. Hi, sweetie. Marilyn was happy you were on her tribe too. Having like seen, a couple seasons of this play out, and see the way that Bennett fought in the end, because we're going to talk about everything in between, but I think what's really impressive is we don't see a lot of people fight the way that Bennett fought, right out in the open of like, this is what's going to happen and I'm ready to make the move. Brian, what was your reaction to that? Would you have played like that in that situation that Bennett was in?
I think you can never just like lay down. I mean, the whole point of like playing the game, and like when I played on my season, I had a very like, I want to make the best like TV I can, which is why on that season, like I'm flipping from different sides. And like, I think if you go to play any of these games, you need to play 100%. You can't give up. You owe that to everybody who applied and to the people who put the game together, because as you two know, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I appreciated how hard Bennett was fighting. And I'd like to think that if I was ever in that position, I would do the same. And hopefully successfully. No, but sometimes
The comment is completely warranted. There was zero finesse. Like any finesse was out the window. Like after night one and on no sleep. But
sometimes you just get into a position in these games where you cannot get out of it. No matter how good you are at it, no matter what you say, you can be like telling people this is what's going to happen. This is how you're going to lose. And unless they're open to that, then they're just going to lose that way.
I agree with that. But did anyone else feel like day one, Bennett is like so much different than day two?
I mean, Bennett, speak to this, because I feel like you had talked a lot about watching yourself back and seeing a lot. I'm curious if this is something you noticed or.
Yeah, so I think there are a few things. So one thing that I wanted to mention was like the and like even my therapist has heard about Survivor New York. Like we have unpacked things. So
that was mine, but not for those reasons.
If I start going too deep, you can stop me. But like one thing that has been very interesting for me to watch, and even like watching here with my roommate, has been like growing up. Like my whole life, I was like a skinny theater kid until like even like I moved here to New York, and like I was in college and I had done theater in college. I was an RA, like, and so to watch this back and have this perception right off the bat of being like some sort of like, I mean, they use the term alpha to describe me, which is like, it's like, I just don't think like it's so inconsistent with how I see myself that's been like the weirdest part to kind of like, I guess, come to grips with. But I think the perception, what was the question, Naomi?
I don't know. You're on the right track. What you've been learning about yourself getting to watch this back, and what kind of shook you.
So the funny thing is, like, and this doesn't come across, I think, on the show at all. If you know Enneagram at all, my Enneagram is Enneagram Type 2, which is basically a Hufflepuff. Like, you are extremely emotional. You're very much a softie deep down. You're a sensor, you're a feeler, and you're like the giver is like the title of it. But when an Enneagram Type 2 gets pushed to a place where they feel like their back is up against a wall, they can go to a very aggressive place. And I didn't even know about Enneagram until about 3 months before this, my job. We did this extensive interview process with like an Enneagram expert. And so watching all this back, I'm like, oh, now I see why I go to the point of like very high, very intense. And I remember people saying like, well, the way you speak to people is very intense. And like the way that I looked at it in the moment was like, oh, I'm just being direct and I'm trying to filter out the bullshit. But watching it back, I'm like, that can feel like bullying. And hearing even, and I reached out to Andrea recently, and we've, of course, I think the world of Andrea. I think she's so funny, and I could watch her do this 100 times over. I want her to do the real thing because I think she's great TV. And I think
she would die. Like, I mean, we all want her to, but she would die.
But but hearing like TJ say that there had been a perception that maybe the way that I was speaking to her came off as bullying, that like crushed me because that was not ever my intention. I, growing up gay, had been picked on myself, like all those things. And I have my mom in the back of my head at, 13 years old telling me, you need to be more assertive. And like, if somebody puts you in a place where your back's against the wall, like, don't ever let them see you sweat. And I think that's kind of what you see come out in the game, is a bit of that sort of like aggression. And watching it back has made me, I guess, really see that in myself for the first time. And it's definitely something to like fix if I was to ever do one of these things again, So it's been very interesting.
Yes, and I have to say, I also think that Survivor is a moment situation, right? Where you're behaving this certain way in a moment that's going very, very fast, and there's no time to look back and reflect. Where even like fake Survivor, you have no time at all. Real Survivor, you have 39 days to maybe think about how you're treating somebody or how you speak to somebody. And I actually was always very impressed that you still took the time. We don't have that much time to strategize, and you still took the time to talk to Paddock and apologize in this episode. I thought is something that not a lot of people would do, I think, in live games in this community. Anyways, they would maybe apologize after the game or talk it out, but nobody would really take the time away from the game that they're trying to win to apologize. And I think that is indicative of like what was going on, which is like you were very stressed, you were losing very hard for reasons that were kind of outside of your control in a lot of ways. Because we'll talk about the physical threat of Bennett, but you were losing in this way that was like uncontrollable and was losing all the agency. And it was like very hard, I think, for you and Kai to sort of be like, well, what the fuck do we do? And the answer was, I don't fucking know. Like, and we'll talk about, because actually I think you guys come a lot closer than is realized in the episode to actually getting a flip to happen.
Yeah.
But Chris, I want you to talk to me a little bit about like the idea of challenge threat Bennett. Like, you watched all this footage back. I know people talk about it a lot in these early days. Like, do you think you know why people saw him as a challenge threat?
I don't know. I think it's just he was a little bit more aggressive. I think specifically like in the digging challenge, he called everybody out. And, this wasn't on every camera, but like I finally found one camera angle where you could see him vividly pointing and screaming in a good, like, audible way that you can hear like the way he spoke just seemed very aggressive.
Yeah.
And it kind of threw people off. And I think that was the turning point of this whole like orange and pink need to come together and get rid of blue, because if blue's going to play that hard this early, then that's a problem to people. And I think him running in the first challenge and doing so well for whatever reason, like he's just running. Like, it's not that big of a deal, but people turned that into like, oh my God, he's a Greek god. I mean, look at him, he's good looking and he can run. Like, that's the biggest threat out there to people. And I think that turned Bennett off, because in so many confessionals, he's talking about trying to dumb down his threat over and over. He even sat out of the third immunity challenge, and then his tribe loses the challenge because he's so afraid. I don't know if that's the correct term, like if you were so afraid, but you were just afraid of the fact that people would view you as a big threat after, the digging challenge, because you knew maybe that people had been turned off by that. So there was a lot of little instances that happened pre-swap that kind of like created your target to be so big, and to, even if you weren't necessarily such a threat in challenges, I think that I think you and Billy are very much on the same level, you and Kyle, you and TJ, but they didn't get as much slack as you did. And I'm still curious to this day why that is. I think Davey and you, if you had a physical fight, I think Davey could take you. I mean, that's why I'm just like confused.
So, thank you. Like, and we talked about this a little bit before we went live here, but there was a comment during one of these pods, I think it was from Anessa, about like, and I don't know if it was directed at me or it was directed at everyone else or what, but she was like, running does not make a physical threat. And that was very much part of like my approach, because you can see in the confessionals, like, say what you will, I felt like I was pretty keenly aware of like how I was being perceived. Maybe day 2 it went out the window, but like day 1 was very much on high alert around like, okay, how are the other teams receiving me? And in the heat of the moment, the digging challenge was not my finest moment. But when it came to like deciding roles for a challenge, I felt like if I run, I just run and I get out of the way. If you do a puzzle and you lose the puzzle, then you lost it for your team. if you do the puzzle and you win the puzzle, then these people who are already perceiving me as some sort of threat now see it as an even bigger threat. And I mean, I got an even bigger target on me come a swap or come a merge, right? But in terms of like brute strength, there are easily 4 people out there who have me beat. Kyle, Davey, TJ, Billy. In terms of throwing, Davey can throw. I've seen him on a dodgeball court. I have no hand-eye coordination. And so part of it too was just knowing like my strength probably is in the running, which is also like, I don't know. I think I look really goofy running. Like if Davey that he likes to send me and it's a picture of me running and I look like some sort of Bigfoot, like the form is all off, like, but I was still being perceived as like this threat. And I think a lot of it comes down to that opening challenge where we had to decide one person, if we are going to go for the advantage, who's running for it. And I don't remember the specifics, but I don't think I would have been like, oh, let me run for it, being a fan of the show. But there was probably a consensus of like, hey, you run for it, and you don't want to be super defiant up front either. And so I did, and looking back on it, like that I think definitely set the tone for a lot of the game, which is really, really interesting. That something that early on can like impact so much of the game.
Well, and what I also have to say is like, I think that it's interesting because throughout this season, we've never seen somebody be called a puzzle threat or like a mental threat, but we have people like Andrea who solved a lot of the puzzles, especially in the early game. And we see Emily F kind of get voted out, but like people like Liska were doing all the puzzles and Paddock and things like that. Like, and nobody ever really sort of calls them out for being in the more like brainy zone of this game. So I think that this game was a moment where everyone kind of looked at each other and was like, oh my God, everybody kind of has like really like jacked arms. Are they a comp beast? It's like that like meme where it's like the guy's like in a butterfly. It's like, it's not
funny.
really
That's
true.
So true. But can I say that like, you know, it's interesting. I think one of the most interesting parts of the season is the fact that Bennett gets called this threat constantly. I remember seeing the comments that, oh, as soon as Bennett has to go to tribal council after the first time Bennett goes to tribal council that doesn't involve all blue people, he's out. This is what the audience seems to believe. Mm-hmm. But despite that, the first tribal council he goes to after Marilyn leaves, he's brought up briefly by Sarah and Jack, but it's shut down super quick by TJ and Billy. And he's able to survive onto the merge, onto the top 9. And I think that is a really interesting story that everybody sees him as this massive threat, but he's able to just continue on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
I think if I had to pick one quality about myself that I would say is most threatening, like I do think I'm like fairly articulate, and like maybe that's it. But it weirdly the way they described it was more of like being a challenge threat. And I think the other thing too is like you also hear about I was called a snake. I was voted by everyone in this last challenge before Kai went out the biggest snake. I never once, aside from Matt, never once turned on any of my allies. And that was actually, we saw that. That was started with Kai's idea. I went along with it, and I'm happy to talk about that vote because I know there was a lot of comments. But, there were a lot of different things that I think were associated with me some that I think are very much correct, and then others that I think were like, actually, if you just look at the facts, it's actually not true at all. And so it's very interesting. Yeah.
For the record, there's nothing wrong with being a snake. I just want to.
I agree.
Brian, so that I bring this to you. Like, what do you think it is about these games that make people sort of like kind of see something and fixate on it and then not really acknowledge what the actual reality is? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I'm kind of like, it's really kind of the narrative of the season in a lot of ways of making up a reality and then acting on it.
Sure. I think obviously all these games are quite short, so you're going to only have so long to make a first impression. And honestly, painting Bennett as a physical threat only helps everyone else in the game because especially when the game is so short, there's often not really good reasons to get rid of people beyond your own selfish interests. So you got to do whatever you can to throw people under the bus, and like labeling someone a threat in the challenges is just an easy way to like get heat off you and put it onto someone else, especially with, only 2-day games.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about something really quick.
Yes.
I love Bennett's. This confessional is my favorite confession, one of my top 10 favorite confessionals of all time, where Bennett imitates, like, I think Jack. Like, you're by the gate, Bennett, and you're
Or
like
the pink
saying like,
tribe,
"Oh,
yeah.
we should go in the bed to sleep at night."
No.
And I had to cut so much of that confessional because you probably remember this, but my neighbor's dog is like such a little bitch and just kept barking the whole time. And you mentioned it like multiple times throughout that confessional, like, what the fuck is wrong with this dog? But it was just so funny to see because I had not seen like a really goofy side to you yet. And that was like the first time that it was like really goofy. And then like after you saw Davey find the clue, like that confessional of
It's
you
so
saying that
funny.
you saw him like find it and the face you made, it was just so funny. And it was so good to see like the not so serious competitive side that maybe the other players had viewed you as. It was cool to see. I think even for the audience to see you in that light. But also seeing you go to the tree
Oh,
in the episode and you look around the tree by yourself and not find the idol. I think that's amazing because Liska, Alex, and I hid that the night before, and we tried to make it as obvious as possible. And it didn't happen. You didn't find it.
It was right in front of my face. And I remember afterwards, Alex came up to me and was like, I have a clip that's like 2 minutes long of you being literally like your face is almost touching the branch where it was lying. And I don't know what was going on. I didn't see it, which of course you kick yourself for that. But the sort of imitation of, it was more of a collective imitation of like the whole group, because
yeah.
that night of the merge, we get to the merge, and I remember one of the first people I talked to after we merged was Paddock, because Paddock and I, and this is why it's funny to me that there was this sense of like that I had made things personal, or that she had kind of perceived things as being personal and she was upset about it, was because we hadn't had any interaction all of day one. We were never on a tribe together, nothing. And so our first interaction genuinely was that night. And I pulled her aside, and, you know, we didn't really know if we had numbers. It seemed like Kyle and Andrea might have been drifting a little bit. And I went to her and asked her, like, you know, what's the status in terms of like, how are you feeling about things? And that's when she told me, and great gameplay, but told me that she was sick of the pink tribe. And like, looking back on it, it was definitely a lie. And it was a really good lie, because I bought it hook, line, and sinker, until I can't remember who came up to me, but it became very clear right away that it was like that she had lied. And so at that point I was like, oh fuck, things aren't going well. Like the tides are definitely turning. They're probably going to be coming for the four of us, me, Billy, TJ, and Kai. And so I was like, I'm going to stay up all night and look for this idol. And all of a sudden everyone wanted to go to bed. And I'm like, you had like, no, like, and of course it just felt a bit like, no, come on, guys. Like, we need our beauty sleep. And I'm like, if you guys were on the bottom or like in this position, you would not be saying this. And so like, that's kind of where that frustration started, was like, it just felt like, and I get it. I totally understand it from their standpoint in the game. But it was like, of course you guys are saying that because you have a massive majority over the four of us. And that's just kind of how that came out. Yes. I don't remember the dog though.
You don't remember the dog? Oh, okay.
Bennett,
I'll have to show you.
If it makes you feel better, I don't think this got caught on camera last season, but after the merge, there was an idol hidden in like a cinder block step that was like very prominent to where like a lot of the camp was happening. And I literally like looked at it and was like, no, that's way too obvious for an idol to be there. And then Alex like walked past me, stuck his hand into it, and pulled out an idol. So it happens.
Actually, Brian, what's better is that Jenny put her hand in there, saw spider webs, she screamed, and she said, no, I can't do that. And then Alex went there like 30 seconds later and grabbed it. I'll never forget that. It was hilarious.
Well, let's talk about the Matt vote. Brian was supposed to join us for the Matt vote. Mm-hmm. But Bennett, I think that this kind of vote decision has gotten like sort of overwhelmingly like big for no reason. But you had mentioned to me before the podcast that you thought there were things that didn't get shown that you remember. So let's talk about not what happened on camera, but what you remember that didn't end up getting shown. And then maybe Chris, we can talk about like, you know, where this went and where it came, you know, is this footage even there? Is it listenable? Is the train just honking its horn so loud you can't hear any of it? So Bennett, tell me what you remember.
Curious.
Yeah, so this is what, like, because I talked to Kai, TJ, and Billy around the time this aired, and I think they'll back me up here. I think they're in the chat, so guys, help me out here if I'm saying anything wrong. But the way that I actually remember it, and the way that they confirmed, at least after this aired, and of course we're 2 years out, so we'll see, but was that Sarah and Jack were pushing my name. And this round specifically, we had very little time before that vote. And it was dark, we were by the pool, so we were also like, you're condensed into a very small area. And so like, running off and having like louder conversations was more difficult. And so it really felt like a game of pinball where people were just like literally like in a triangle, like bouncing off of each other. And at that time too, because we had just swapped, I didn't know how Billy and TJ were taking to me. And so I remember having many very brief conversations with Billy in that moment, like, you're sure we're good? Because I didn't even know if I could trust him. And so Matt had come to me and said, like, what are you thinking? And we told him what we were thinking. And I think at the time, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were going for Jack. And he was like very like defiant about that idea. And to me, there was only like so many options that we had. We felt like TJ and Billy were going to work with us. So I'm like, well, the only alternative would be Sarah, but Matt wasn't pushing Sarah either. And then Matt was also bouncing over to Sarah and Jack and talking to them. And that's kind of when I got in my head of like, is this guy going to screw me now? Like, is he going to flip? Because debatably, that could have been a good move for Matt's game. Because from the blue team, I felt really tight with Kai. I felt pretty good with Kyle. We saw how that played out after the merge. I love you, Kyle. But we saw how that played out. And so to me, I was like, it would kind of make sense for if Matt's going to flop, like he might flop now. And so when Kai came up to me and said, do we just go Matt? And basically said that TJ and Billy were already on board with that. I was like, let's do it. And the funny thing is that didn't make error. Were told to line up for tribal. And the whole thing had gotten scrambled. And Matt looked me right in the eye. And I felt really bad because like night one, we slept, me, Matt, and Kira slept outside the tent and had like a great night. And I couldn't fall asleep and told Matt, like, I'm used to smoking a little bit of weed before I fall asleep. And Matt was like, well, I'm going to be sharing all this. But like, he had a Xanax. It's fine. And so we both popped a Xanax, fell asleep. And I was very grateful to him for that. And like, I really enjoy Matt. I think he's very funny.
He's so funny, yeah.
You popped a Xanny in my backyard.
We now banned from ever participating in it. But anyways.
Oh my God.
Anyways, I felt indebted to Matt and I enjoyed Matt. And so I felt really bad because he's right there and he's looking me right in my eyes. And all of a sudden he goes, it's me, isn't it? And I'm thinking like, I don't know how he got wind of this because I thought this plan was like very quick and whatever. And then he looks at me and he goes, well, they said your name. And I said, who? And then Naomi said, shh. And so I was ready to shit my pants in that trial. Like legitimately, like, Survivor New York stomach. It had fallen full effect. And I was ready to like rush out of there to the bathroom right before the votes were revealed because I was terrified. But Matt scared the shit out of me at the last second. And then Naomi was like, shh. And I was like, who? And he couldn't say anything. It was great. But yeah.
I think that's what Matt said. Didn't he say that, Naomi, during his podcast? Like he had asked Bennett straight to his face and that's when he knew that he was going home. Like he didn't know until that exact moment.
Yeah. I really thought it was me. And so to watch the episode back and not see any footage of like Sarah and Jack.
There is no footage. I went through that. There is no footage of Sarah and Jack mentioning it to anybody, but there is footage of Matt and I think TJ saying that's what they wanted. They wanted to vote for you.
Yeah.
But both TJ and Matt shut that down.
Yeah.
And it became like it was shut down so quickly that Sarah and Jack kind of just gave it up and just kind of moved on right from there because they knew that if someone from blue and somebody from orange both said no, that it was like it's not going to happen. So I think that it wasn't really like a long conversation from them.
Right. And all of like the muck taken out of it, at the core of it, it just felt like Matt was jumping around and very much becoming the swing vote. And it just felt like maybe we just take him out before he can make a move here, because I think Kai and I genuinely didn't know, can we trust him? And we didn't know if we could trust orange or pink at the time. And so it just felt like, okay, well, maybe we go with that and we see what happens. But going into that tribal, I genuinely didn't know if it was going to be me or him.
Yeah, and I think also in that situation, you were going to go from 13 to 12. I think that's perfectly, at the end of the day, it could have been a merge. We had one more fucked up round for you guys, but you guys were like really close. So it's kind of like, oh, do we do this? Whatever. And Kristen is here to comment. So Kristen and I were helping at Live to Give, and Kristen is a huge fan of the season so far. And I let her watch episode 10 early. I let her watch the merge early. And she was like, Naomi, I think I know who the final four are. I had a dream about it. And she mentioned you and 3 other people. I don't want to say who those 3 other people are, but she mentioned you, and I was like, oh man, like, I'm so sorry. I know Bennett's going very soon.
Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Yes. And so this is what's so interesting to me about like Survivor is, especially Backyard Survivor, like we give you that day 0 because we want you to have the ability to form bonds with other people that you might not meet until the end of day 1 or day 2. So that way, if you're in a situation like with the Matt vote and a potential flip could happen, you say to yourself, you know what, I talked to Billy and TJ earlier in the game, and maybe I do want to flip with them, because at the end of the day, like, we can't stop you from spending time with the people that you're sort of sleeping outside with. And it's just easier and builds more connections for more interesting kind of gameplay to happen. Jack here saying hello as well. And then Bennett, you lead your tribe to puzzle victory. I was really impressed by this. I remember like filming it, and I thought this challenge was going to take for fucking ever. So thank you. And I was like, oh my God, like he just like absolutely nailed this puzzle in like 10 minutes or less. It was really impressive.
Well, and I think you guys touched on it in an earlier podcast, but that was the moment where I found out, for whatever reason, apparently I can't be blindfolded. I started literally like heart racing. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And Billy, thank God, who also, he and I are anxiety sisters, he was like, I get it, sis, don't worry. And he went in with the blindfold. And I was like, guys, and I remember telling them before this, I was like, I'm going to try my best, but like, we're probably not going to win this, because like, this is not my thing. It was also very hard to see, and those colors.
Yeah, the colors were hard to see. Yeah.
A little bit different, or difficult to differentiate. And so as much as I would like to say that was pure intellect, and of course I mastered it, that was a lot of luck. Like, a lot of that came down to pure dumb luck, and we got very lucky there. But also we were very cursed there, because you then see what that did to the 4 of us throughout the next several rounds. So,
but the thing is, like, it's so fascinating to me because Naomi and I never really thought that through. We never said like, oh, well, the 7 people left, they're gonna have this bond. Like, it still fascinates me that the 7 of them took that moment and said that, well, we should build an alliance from that.
Yeah.
And kind of, in a way, kind of threw away what you had worked with Kyle for so long.
Andrea,
like Kai, really, I feel like I love Kai and Kyle, and I feel like in a way Kyle did betray Kai in that moment, because he had said that was his ride or die, but he chose the majority versus that relationship. And I think that twist was great in its moment, but it's something that I most likely would never do again.
Yeah, I think it didn't help that the 4 of us who were on that tribe for that one round were also, if you think about it, all 4 of us were perceived as threats. Billy as like a big time challenge threat. TJ had been to the final 2 of Brooklyn South, right?
Yeah, he got second place. Yeah.
Kai had won Brooklyn South, and then like me, whatever. But
whatever.
I think the 4 of us together as a unit, it kind of made sense for the 7 of them to be like, do we just take them out one by one by one? Like, I kind of understand it. And so, but Chris, I do agree with you. I don't know that like with a different group that it would have had that same result. I think it was very unique to the cast and the way that like fell for that specific round.
Well, and I want to bring this to Brian, because I didn't expect this to come up, because it's not like they all voted for Dresden or something. It's not like they all came to a consensus. They voted against each other. Very, very like intentionally, like playing an idol and using a double vote. Like, you wanted those motherfuckers to go home, And I feel like that was a situation that I was shocked that the 7 came out of this. Brian, were you surprised to see the 7 so strong up until this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think because it was a one round twist is certainly surprising, but I also just think like oftentimes when you have a bunch of big fans and a bunch of people who are like more experienced, you see more like volatility in alliances. You see people more willing to flip. It's very rare in these types of games where you see just a straight begonging, but is
Yeah,
what it
I
is.
think so. I agree with Brian on that. It's like in LRGs lately, I have not really seen like a straight pagani. Even in like the real show, it's sort of even rare now.
Mm,
I mean, it's not really a pagonging in the
Yeah.
total sense, but in that sort of situation, it was. But I think it
mm,
goes back to what Bennett says of that the four of them were just huge threats, and Bennett was the biggest threat. But luckily, Davey was his like connector to kind of get him through the first two votes. But after that, he had no more pull from there.
mm.
Um, but I really want to go back really quickly because Alex has stated many, many times this is where Bennett and Kai's game goes home is letting Matt leave. I mean, I understand Kai's reasons because she really just felt paranoid with him. He was bouncing around to every single person. But why in that moment? Because you immediately just agree with her. It didn't even seem like a second thought crossed your mind. You just were like, okay, you want to do Matt? Let's do Matt. Let's pull the trigger. That's your exact words. So why were you so quick to jump on Matt and not defend him a little bit?
Yeah, as a proud graduate of the Sandra Diaz Twine School of Survivor, like in a situation of pressure where you think that your ass is on the line. It was like I don't care who. Like I love Kai, but if like I don't know, like I probably wouldn't have. But if I found out that like 4 people or 5 people on that team were gunning for Kai, I don't know that I would have voted for her. So maybe that's a bad example. But with Matt, it just felt like I didn't feel like he was super tight with me, Kyle, or Kai. I felt like he might have felt like the writing was on the wall for him. And watching how much at least I remember him talking to Sarah and Jack that round, and then coming to me and being really surprised when we suggested Jack, I was like, he might flip on me and it might actually be a decent move for him. And I thought my name was being thrown out. So, like, I can see where Alex would say that. But I think from my perspective, it's like, of course, hindsight is 2020. Maybe that would have totally changed the game for me, and maybe it was a boneheaded move. But in the moment, that's all you have, and you have that perception. And my perception was Matt might flip, and I'm the alternative. And so what am I going to do, right? Like there were no other names I could throw out at that point. And so that's really all it came down to. But, maybe he's right. Like maybe that is like a huge downfall for our game. But I didn't have that sort of sense in my mind during that round.
Well, I have to say, I think that another thing is that really, because I think I'm shocked that the 7 stuck together, because I do think that Paddock, to an extent, isn't lying when she says that, like, I'm doing a lot of what the Pink Tribe does, because the Pink Tribe just tried to vote her out for, like they just voted out all of the Orange Tribe members except for her. Like, there is an extent of, like, I don't know why the 7 stuck together. I don't know how they all believed each other. I think it was really the pink power, like the Jack and Sarah kind of going over. But there's a world where, like, Paddock says, like, screw these guys. I don't want to work with them anymore, And so I don't necessarily think that the Matt vote was a nail in any sort of coffin. I do think that there's a weird situation where, because you guys don't go to that tribal and because all this stuff happens, and then in the morning everybody makes up and whatever, all of a sudden it's pink power for life. Like they're successful, and I think we're gonna see in this next episode where the actual lines lie, because I think when what for the people who haven't seen it yet, when what the actual situation is and who is actually going to go home next episode, it makes it a lot more clear what's going on. But Bennett, your prediction is that Kyle's next, and then what? Alejandro, and then Davey, and then you call them. Have you apologized for this? The 4 misfit toys.
Yes, and I would like to clarify this, because I went back and watched. When I heard it myself, I was like, "Ooh, that's gross." But watching it back, you did say that the first time I said it, it was specific to the fact that they had all kind of come from different alliances. Paddock, was the only one left from Orange at that point. Sarah and Jack were kind of working together. But again, at the swap, Sarah had told me that they didn't have much of a relationship. And of course, watching it back, I feel like a total fucking idiot for going to her and being like, let's take Jack out. Like, she was 100% right in her reaction to that for me. But and then Andrea, I thought was true blue and was telling me through like the first few rounds of the merge that she was. And then eventually, of course, you realize, like, I think it was by like the second round after the merge, I was like, okay, no, she's with them and she's lying. But masterful play on Sarah and Paddock's end was, I felt like they were having Andrea and Jack kind of do their bidding in terms of gathering information, because it's something that didn't show up a lot in the edit, but I almost every single round, even after like voting for Andrea, trying to push Jack, the two of them were still coming up and talking to me to ask for information. And I just always felt like, you're just lying to me. Like, I know you're lying to me, but I felt like they were running information back to the two of them. And again, like, I recognize the game, like, good on you. Like, I thought that was very interesting, kind of how that worked. But looking at it, I think you have the thing with being on the bottom in a situation like this is you become very keenly aware of like what the power structure actually looks like, because there is no like disillusionment in your mind at that point, right? And so the way that I saw it, and we'll see how it plays out, but was that the four of those four are together. And I think I felt it because Emily and Sarah weren't doing much talking to me, and I can appreciate the line in the sand. I felt like it probably wasn't worth any of our time at that point. Totally fine, nothing personal. But they weren't working with me. Andrea and Jack would run to me for information, but then would never vote with us in any capacity. So I felt like, okay, they're definitely together. And the only ones that I felt like were truly wavering were Davey, Alejandro, and Kyle, all three of whom we are known to be perceived as pretty big threats. And so to me, these four others that kind of came from all sorts of alliances and groups have now formed together. And it felt like it was just like the writing was on the wall. And I actually think part of the reason, if you watch the last tribal council, I actually didn't see it the first time I watched. Kyle actually clocked it and had sent me the screenshot.
Oh, I have them. Sarah texted me about this today. Let me put them on the screen. Hang on.
Let's see if we're thinking of the same thing.
Really quickly, Bennett, would you answer Sarah's question? Would you have ever done Billy? Yes or no? Just have to say yes or no. If they had brought it to you that they like Sarah and Jack were going to vote for Billy, would you have done it?
If I still felt that I was the only other option, like, I love Billy, but Billy and I hadn't even talked much then. So yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bennett, are you talking about this?
So this is the moment that, and like, again, game recognized game, good on the four of them for trying to lock him down. Sarah physically had grabbed Kyle and was like, can you stop?
Hang on, there's another one.
Because I was trying to talk to them. And I think that everyone, in a way, and I totally understand it, because all it took, we needed Davey's extra vote, which we had. And Davey had told me, if I can get a number, all we need is either Alejandro or Kyle. I'll do the extra vote and we'll switch it up. And
wait, I've never seen this.
Look at the way that Sarah is clinging to Kyle.
To try to stop her,
wait.
because I think
When
the
did
way
this happen?
Yeah, I think
At
the
Tribal.
way it talked was like, I think it was pretty honest, and I think I was like, I think I was right that like the four of them were together. The other three are probably going to be next in September, and we'll see how it plays out.
Kai's face is so funny there. I love it. So wait, was Kyle trying to whisper to Bennett and then Sarah
Kyle
was
trying
holding
to
back?
talk to Davey, because remember, this whole episode is like Kyle and Davey being like, should we make the move? Because you would basically have Alejandro, Sarah, Jack, Paddock on one side, and then you would have Davey, Bennett, Kyle, and the extra, and I'm missing someone an extra vote. Like, it would have been a 6-4 sort of flip. Oh, and Paddock is on this side, I guess. Like, you would have needed to basically have the 6, which would include Kyle and Davey, but they needed each other to know that they were going to make that move to do the flip.
And the weird thing to me in watching this episode back, and maybe it was just this realization of like, they're not going to flip. Because there were several moments at Tribal, both this time and even the previous Tribal, I looked at Davey. You can actually see it. I think it's at the TJ vote and it was after like things had like all of a sudden it was like, wait, did things get personal? Are people upset with me? And I just felt like this isn't worth it, like for a $0 game for me to like have Davey potentially tank his game because of my bad gameplay. And I whispered to Davey or mouthed to Davey, if it's me, it's okay. Like at that point, I was just kind of like, it is what it is. Like I'm good to go. And so I felt like Davey and I kind of always were giving each other these sorts of signals. And in this moment at Tribal, it felt very much like it's probably not going to work. And so I think we had kind of like resigned to it, but it's weird to me that, and I think that's why we still voted Jack, but watching it back, I was like, why didn't we throw him for a loop and vote for like Sarah, who like, maybe this speaks to Sarah's game in that like, we didn't think to write Sarah's name down, but I think that would have been the blind side, would have actually been to take out Sarah or Paddock here. And instead we still threw our votes on Jack, who we knew had an idol. We knew who was probably going to play an idol, rightfully so. He played it. I mean, technically he did it. He didn't need it, but could have. But it was odd to me watching it back that we went for the person who very obviously had the idol and didn't try to at least take a jab at Paddock, Sarah, or even Andrea.
So Brian, talk to me about this kind of like the flippiness of it all. What do you think about everything, especially what Bennett just said? Because I think Bennett, great points were made. Brian, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm always a firm believer is if you're not at the head of your alliance, even if it's majority, that's no better than being in the minority alliance to me. So, like, if you're not calling the shots or at least like high up on the totem pole, you got to be looking at the people in the minority alliance not as your enemies, but as people to potentially work with and put yourself in a better position to succeed. That's just how I feel. I know, like it's hard to say when you're not in the moment and you're not like, oh God, I'm worried that I'll get voted off if I try to flip. But I think it's better to try something and come in ninth than to, get to the end and not get any votes. With that said, I flipped a lot and I got 1 vote at Final Tribal Council. So it doesn't always work, but I did feel like in my game, I was in a bad position in terms of where I was. If I got to the end, I was going to lose. So I tried to mix it up and tried to put myself in a better position to win. It didn't work out, but I think, you got to play for your own success and not facilitate other players' success in the game. And that's just how I feel. You got to be selfish in these games.
Interesting. Emily disagrees with you and Sarah agrees with you. Well,
be in charge, but don't be like the person that everyone knows is in charge. Like try to play the background. Like I think Chris asked me when I was interviewing for who's your favorite player, who do you want to play as? I said Sari because I always loved how she was able to be calling the shots, but not be the person that everyone perceived as calling the shots. So I think that's like the sweet spot to try to be in.
Now, Bennett, what else do we need to talk about? This is your episode.
We need to talk about the confrontation of Bennett and Andrea. I love it. One of my favorite moments. Let's talk about it, Bennett.
Rarely do you ever see somebody in a game go up to someone and be like, I think you're fucking lying. Can we have a team meeting about it?
Yeah.
I love it.
I think you guys and the Survivor International pod, shout out to Jacqueline and Cody.
Jacqueline and Cody, yeah.
Couple name. They clocked it pretty well. And it was that the Andrea, like, love her to death. And again, like she and I have talked recently. I think she's incredibly smart. And I think that she's so funny. I don't think that she's a good liar. And I think she even admits that she's not a good liar, but she still decided to come up with a lie to fuck with me. And I'm like, I don't know. I just maybe wouldn't do that if you don't think that you're a great liar. And so it felt very much, and I will say, when she first called it out at Tribal, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And that's why I was like, wait, where did you find that? I didn't know about it. But then afterwards, it became readily apparent that this was fake. And then Kyle came up to me within a couple of minutes. That edit felt like it happened in real time. Like it was that quick and said something totally different. And I don't even remember the specifics of what it was, but that's when I was just like, and the reason I was so intense about it, and I reached out to her and apologized because I felt like I shouldn't have used the tone that I used, and hearing that like it might have come off as bullying, I genuinely felt really bad about. But in that moment, it felt like we're clearly on the bottom. We don't have the votes. So like it just felt unnecessary to create, whether it's like to create paranoia, but like we weren't the ones that I felt you needed to create the paranoia around. If anything, I felt like you could have used that to stir up some paranoia amongst the majority, which is actually, say what you will about TJ's vote for Jack. That actually suddenly shook up, like everyone was pointing fingers at each other in that 7. But I just felt a little bit like, did you really need to do this? And then within like 30 minutes or so, it felt like, oh, everyone was in on it. So like, I'm just here to like look like a jackass now. And so I was a little hot about it. And watching it back, we can laugh about it. And I regret going to her or going at her, let's call it what it is, with the tone that I did. And that's where my social game clearly like lacks finesse. And it's not an excuse. I'm just trying to hopefully add a little bit of context as to like why that was the way that it was. But I love Andrea. Love me some Andrea. And actually, I will say, going in like I remember leaving the game for like right when I got to jury, and I think right away, even during the touchy subjects challenge, you can see that like the second I was out of that game, it's like
you're having a blast. Yeah,
it is all good. Like it is all good. I'm gonna vote for the best person to win, and like I felt like our cast gave Andrea a little bit of a bad rep. Like I really think that Andrea, like, did her game have the most finesse in the world? No, but like neither did mine, and neither did a lot of people's out there. And I actually think for someone who was, the thing with Andrea is she was in every conversation to the point where it felt a little bit like you couldn't get a moment alone without Andrea physically running up to you. But in a way, in one of these live games, it's a very good strategy. And so when I went to jury, I remember thinking, I feel like people might take her to the end as a GOAT. But if she can articulate herself at Final Tribal, which I felt she was very capable of doing, she's extremely smart, she's getting my vote if she gets to the end. And so it's just an interesting, like, it's interesting to watch it back and watch it play out, because I think her game was a little bit messy, but in a way I kind of like watching that sort of game. And I think that is, you know, it's still strategy, even if it's not the most picture perfect strategy. So.
And yeah, I have to say there's something, and this goes back to Jack as well. There's you guys do this thing where I think you target people like Andrea and Jack because you think that there's a chance that people like Emily or Alejandro or Paddock will vote for them as a sign of like, hey, let's take out some of the weaker members and keep, you know, the gamers in, right? But that is an interesting way to look at it, because if you're that person and people continuously aren't voting you out and your allies are saying no, as much as the opportunity is like right in front of us to vote somebody like Jack or Andrea out, like we're not going to do it. We're not going to take the easy way out. I think it's a good testament to like the people there, because they are proving themselves to be an interesting and loyal enough ally that there's no incentive to vote out somebody like Andrea, because she's always going to be working with you. And I love Andrea's hilariously like, she reminds me almost of like, I can't think of like a good like fake spy, but she reminds me of like a comedic spy where she's like, and now I'm going to infiltrate the other alliance, that just runs over to you and is like, okay, so what are we doing? Like she is so high energy. She has no subtlety to her whatsoever, but that's what makes her so fucking hilarious. And then like, I'm going to do girl power. And to her credit, you 3 guys go before Kai goes. And actually the gender has evened out at this point in the game until Kai gets voted out, which is really interesting. Davey saying Andrea absolutely deserves more credit. Well, Brian, what I want to talk to you about is this sort of post-Bennett vote, like, do you think that maybe Alejandro and Davey or Kyle should have flipped to join this group? Do you think that would have been a good move for Davey and Kyle, especially seeing as they're the ones that this could have made happen?
It could possibly have been a better move, but I think the way that it played out was just like having tribal council immediately after another tribal council. Like at that point, what are they gonna do? Like
Yeah.
they have to have conversations in front of people. It's gonna stifle the potential gameplay. So I'm not gonna get too hard on them for not making a move in that moment, because I don't think I would have like the guts to necessarily just like strategize immediately in front of people, especially after working with them for so long. So it
Yeah.
is what it is. In that moment, I think it's just tough to really pull anything off. And I think with Kai not winning immunity and coming so close to winning immunity in that, it's just like, it's just safe and easy to be like, all right, it's Kai now. It's Bennett, now it's Kai, and then we'll figure out what happens here, because Davey has the extra vote. Like I'm sure in his mind he's like, I can figure something out after this. Like it's unfortunate because it removes a piece from the board that's not connected to anybody, and that's of course a piece that you always want to scoop up and use for yourself. But I just think it's a tough situation to do it right away.
And also, to be clear, and in their defense in a weird way, I felt like the three of them were a little bit in a situation of like they didn't know which side to go to, and I think rightfully so, because realistically, I don't want to go to the end with Davey. I don't want to go to the end with Kyle. And I don't want to go to the end with Alejandro. So, like, we were telling them all these things, but I'm like, yeah, we'll do it. And then, like, maybe I would give them, like, maybe one round. And then, like, probably, I knew that my better option was probably to go with at least one of the other four. And, of course, we didn't know if it would be, like, a final two or a final three, so that you had to put that or take that into account. But, like, I told Davey, like, after the game, at 9, I didn't have any hard feelings leaving the game, because like I didn't think that it necessarily would have been the best decision for Davey to take me further, because I didn't want to sit there. Like, everyone loves Davey. Like, I'm not going to sit next to Davey at the end. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And this is the game of Survivor, right? Is you're hedging your bets at all times and thinking, is this alliance actually going to work with me? And like, I do think, some people hate the majority alliances. I do think that a 7 is so interesting, because a 7 is going to break apart immediately, and lines are going to be drawn, and you just kind of have to watch where those lines fall. And we've been seeing, actually, someone sort of talked about this on Australian Survivor, is like, it's great that I'm in a group, but like, I'm going to be voted out. I might as well flip on this group. But it is about hedging your bets, and you don't know what's going on. I didn't vote Kai when she went yet. So Davey and Kyle do not vote for Kai when Kai goes home. Who they vote for? Andrea, right? Like, it's a messy vote, let me tell you. And
it's really tough to hear that, because I had never done that sort of situation before, like having someone voted out right after. But I had done that so that we would leave, like people would be able to leave earlier and us to finish a little bit earlier. So I thought it was in a way people would appreciate that more. And at the time I knew that it would fuck somebody over, and I hated that it was Kai. I hated the situation, and to hear them say that, makes me feel bad. But it's like, they've done it on the real show many times, and in a way it's sort of like it worked out on the show the way it worked out here, where it's like, like in South Pacific, they did that really quickly to get rid of like Whitney, and then in Redemption Island, they did that really quickly to get rid of Steve. They were going to be pagonged anyway, so it kind of was like a quick kind of get out moment. But looking at that challenge and seeing how close she got, I mean, we'll get into that tomorrow, but it's really tough to see that.
Imagine how chaotic that tribal would have gotten if she was one.
She had one.
Unity, and I'm a rebellion teacher on the jury bench. Like, is she about to pull this out? And then Davey gets it at the last second. But I'm like,
well, of course, Davey gets it by writing 69. Like, why 69, Davey?
Gotta respect it.
I know, that's so funny.
Chris, I'll just say, Survivor's not fair. So don't.
I know, like, but it's like,
you gotta play the hand you're dealt in Survivor, and sometimes the twists don't work to your favor.
Yeah, well,
it's crazy because little things can change everything. If we had given them 30 minutes to talk after that, who knows what would have happened.
Well, so I want to know, Chris, like, if somebody had gotten up in the middle of that challenge and been like, I want to talk, would you have let them talk? If someone goes, okay, I'm the biggest thing, let's go.
No, I don't think it was during the challenge, but if the challenge was over and everyone got up collectively and just started going at it, I probably would have given them a few minutes. I don't remember if they did or didn't do that. From my film, I don't believe that they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
It's
didn't.
tough,
They
but
really didn't talk. It kind of they all knew what they were gonna do. They knew Kai didn't have the idol, so it was kind of is what it is. But let's just get back to Bennett because this is the
yes.
Bennett show. One of my other favorite moments of Bennett is during the challenge that he went home on. He mentioned like drop your fucking stack. I thought that was hilarious. I think that was a really funny moment just to like laugh. I think everyone that was watching that laughed during that. What did you think
Yeah.
about the challenges, Bennett?
Oh my god, they were so much fun. And that last one though, I think the last round is when you could see. I knew I was out next. Like there was no, like, and so it was just kind of like that was the point where I think also the vote before was a bit of a wake up call of like, okay, don't take this so seriously. Like, chill the fuck out, basically. And I feel like right before I was going was a little bit more of like a point to have a little bit of fun, like, and that's really all it was. And also like, and Davey can attest to this, I have the shakiest hands in the world. And so once it was a challenge involving the like any form of balance involving your hands, I was like, there's no way I'm taking this. And so I think it was just kind of that came out in the moment.
Yeah. Also, Paddock, I don't think we actually have, because you guys wrote it on a piece of paper. I don't think we have the pieces of paper anywhere, unless Chris, you have them. But
I do have them somewhere. I have season 2, 3, and 4 somewhere. I have to find them.
Oh my god, the bitch hate.
But wait,
Davey
okay, that is so funny. I love that moment. Oh my god, go talk about it, Bennett, please. It's so
when Bennett, so I think what is really funny is like there's this great moment where you're like, I don't think Paddock's with us. We should just vote Paddock. And they're like, and the names are going back and forth. Kai's trying to vote Davey, blah blah blah. And you tell Davey they're throwing your name out. And Davey says, "You better tell people boys to get my name out of their mouth."
Davey says you shake. Is that true? You were shaking?
No. That was he was talking about the challenge. I have
okay.
different from this situation. But yeah, in that situation, it felt like, and as you guys saw, and I said to both of you after the episode too, like I felt like everyone, regardless of the outcome of the episode, because love Billy, everyone was playing so hard that it made me like proud to watch back because I'm like, okay, like people actually came to like show up and show out. But in that moment, and in like the 5 minutes before the vote, there were so many names being tossed out. And the only one in that moment that I felt was kind of starting to stick was Paddock. And Paddock had, I thought, started to show up as like a pretty big threat and knew what she was doing, navigating all these different relationships and different alliances. And so to find out that then all of a sudden the vote was turned on Davey, and then I go to their group, and I can't remember what they said, but the vote was not Paddock. And I was clearly hot about it. And I said something, and then I like defiantly turned around and stormed off. And you can actually see a moment where Sarah and I think Alejandro are next to each other, and they look at each other like who the fuck is this guy? Rightfully so. But then I turned back around and I looked at Davey and was like, because I was like, you know what? I'm just going to say it. I was like, they're throwing your name out just to watch him storm because they were.
Yes.
All of a sudden, it's not funny to him anymore, and he got and it became well. I hope you better tell your voice to get the way it's edited. Cuts quick because you can tell there was like a buffer time, like it needed to load quick, and it was hysterical. It was almost like Davey was going to fight me. So at the time, of course, like we know each other so well that like a moment like that in our real life, I would just like outwardly laugh at and be like, girl, calm the fuck down. But in that moment, I couldn't say like laugh about it and chill the fuck out because people would be like, wait, what is this weird dynamic that the two of you have? So it was so funny.
Like you and Davey are close enough. Like you guys hang out a lot. Does Survivor New York come up a lot, like, or at all? Does like I'm just curious because like I don't really have like a lot of friends that play the game. I mean, like Brian has played with with Jenny, with his girlfriend for years. So it's like, I don't know how often they talk about it because that was 5 years ago. So I'm just curious on your side, Bennett, like how often do you bring it up with like Davey or anybody?
As a 31-year-old man, I would like to say that I don't talk about it all the time, but Davey and I talk about it all the time to the point where like our friends are like, you guys are still talking about that thing that you did like 2 years ago. Like we won't shut up about it. but you do. I mean, it is, and watching it definitely died down for a little bit in between. I will say, watching it back brings back
it starts all over again.
What if and all that, and it's been so fun to watch back. I was really nervous before it aired back, and I was like, I don't want to watch this. It's going to be like uncomfortable, and there are definitely cringy moments, but no, we talk about it all the time, and our friends are a little perplexed. But we've gotten a couple of friends to apply. Jury's out on whether or not they're on the next one, but maybe it'll try out again if they didn't get on that. We'll see. But like,
yeah. You have lovely friends, and I season 5 is around the corner, but season 6 is right ahead. And I think actually one of my favorite episodes is in this episode 10 when Kai and Bennett, you guys are walking away and you're like, I'm fucking pissed. You just will not stop talking about how mad you are. And then Kai goes up to the group of like Alejandro, Sarah, and Davey, and they're just like, so how's it going? And she's like, not good. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, sorry.
And the way
they're so funny.
Davey just has Davey does this thing where like if someone's really hot and mad and he doesn't necessarily feel it, he just kind of keeps this like smirk on his face. So if you go back and watch it, Sarah is fully. I was laughing because Kai was so mad.
She's
Sarah
so mad.
Pen goes, wow, you sound really pissed. And Davey's next to her like, and I'm like, poor Kai. Like we had nothing, but like it really you have to laugh watching it back because we were on the bottom. We had like continuously been lied to, and so like I get it, but it is kind of funny to watch back because Davey's just kind of like.
Yeah,
I do love that moment. Kyle brings up one of the best moments, though. Like that was so fun to watch because I had no idea that you guys had that cute little moment. But another moment that did not make it to air, and maybe Bennett, you remember this. You had went over to the very far end of the field looking for an idol near this like gate, and you were walking back to the camera, and you were like, you know what? If I go out now and Davey is next, and those 4 make it to the end like I think they're going to, I'm going to be able to be like Sheehan and tell them like that quote that Sheehan said. I think it was like, you guys are stupid players, stupid people, or something like that.
Stupid players, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was so funny.
We're going to have to see what happens. We're going to have to watch and see how it all plays out. So
who knows? Yes, I love that you're kind of like, you want Davey to do well, and then you also kind of want to be able to tell him I told you so if things go wrong. So I love that's what friendship is, right? You want to root for your friends, but you also want to tell them they're a dumbass. Brian, do you have a favorite moment from this episode?
The idol rush was certainly very fun, and the Emily like falling out of the tree, and I was like, oh my god, did she get hurt? And then the idol just kind of falling next to her. That was very funny. I do have to bounce though. This is a lot of fun. Bennett, it was great getting to talk to you. Thank you all so much. And
Brian, thank you for being here.
Brian.
We'll keep chit-chatting a little bit, but have a great rest of your night, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Brian.
Bye everybody in the chat.
Bye. Well, guys, the idol, we didn't even talk about the idol rush. Like, there's so much in this episode. I'm glad you guys said 2 podcasts. So the idol fall.
Yeah.
Sarah says, everyone ignoring me when I ask for a bigger person to help stop Emily. Yeah, this is a great moment where, like, for some reason, Kyle disappears, and it's like Sarah is trying to get, like, Emily to not die, but then Emily does die. Like,
I have a question for you guys because I couldn't tell. Was the idol actually on that lower branch?
Mm-hmm.
And so she hit it on the way down? Like
she hit it on the way down, yeah.
What? Okay, so because we were watching it back and I was watching it here and it was like, no, I think it's still that one that was right next to my face earlier, but I didn't know watching it back. But I'm like, I think that's it. But I genuinely watching it back was like, oh, maybe she did see it up there and then it dropped on the way down.
But I'm very confused because we had tied it and there was a knot around it and the tree. So the only way it would have been able to fall is if the knot had come undone. So I guess either she broke something and that's how it fell. I mean, one of the biggest moments we'll bring up tomorrow is obviously Kai not taking it. So I don't want to get into that, but Bennett, were you upset at how close Kai was to being able to take it?
Oh, no, I didn't even see it at the time. I saw Jack snag it, but I think at that point Kai had kind of like moved away from it. And also like in the moment, it looks a little bit more goofy on camera, but in the moment I remember thinking like, damn, she hit the ground pretty hard. Like I think everyone was a bit like, oh, is she okay? And so it wasn't really but then once I saw Jack put it in his pocket, I'm like, I'm not about to let like some sort of shady business happen where we all act like we don't know who has it. And so you heard me again, where my social game could have used improving, yell out like, where'd you find it, Jack? Just to like make sure.
Another question people have brought up to me is, okay, you were the fastest runner. You got to the tree first.
Yeah.
But you didn't seem like you were willing to like climb it. I never thought anybody was going to climb it.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
In what fucking world are we inviting the liability of somebody climbing a tree?
Like from the camera view, like it didn't seem like you really did much. I felt like you got to the tree and then I just see you kind of standing more so and looking, just standing and looking. Sarah and Paddock have this like complete panic to get up to the tree. I mean, Paddock was at the top of this fucking tree that these little kids play at all the damn time. Yeah. I thought the tree was going down too.
Well, and that's the thing. So I looked at it and was like, this tree does not look like it is load bearing. And so I am not going to throw myself into the tree and try to climb up it. And genuinely thought like the way that you guys had always, there were different challenges and stuff. You had kind of always given us a heads up around like just personal safety things. And I'm like, Naomi and Chris are not going to put this thing at the top of this little like rinky dink, like Peanuts Christmas tree. And so I figured it was like lower, like around where our heads are, which is why you see me looking up. And then I thought maybe it's in the dirt around it, or maybe we're all completely off base because you had started saying the clue. Paddock took off like a 747 within like 2 seconds of you, like 2 words of the clue. And so I don't even remember if I heard the whole clue. And so I think that's just kind of like, did someone see something? Did someone not? At the end of the day, like it wasn't going to happen for me. So
I cannot believe it. Sarah thought it was all the way up there. That's hilarious.
But there is a beautiful footage like of their camera going really close, zooming in on it, and then zooming out. I don't know if anybody remembers that. I think that was in the episode before. There was B-roll of that. So I mean, you kind of get an idea. It really was the lowest branch.
It's so odd to me that even in all of the strategy talk that just happened in that field during those 3 rounds, that no one got to it. Because we all kind of knew the night of the merge, you guys explicitly said you do not go into the schoolyard after dark. And I think everyone kind of knew, like, because even that morning when I went out to look, there was a confessional with, I think, Alejandro and Paddock, where they both were joking about me being out in the field looking because they had already gone out there and had like done the whole thing probably like an hour before I was even up. And even then, they didn't see it. I didn't see it. And then all of the strategy talk that happened in those next 3 rounds, nobody clocked it. And it like watching it back, you can see it on the video camera as you're like panning around it. So
it's interesting because I think a lot of them thought that it had already been found. And this is something that I'm debating about. It's like that final 10 challenge, I'm telling you guys, if you drop, I can give you a clue. But by me saying that I'm going to give you a clue, it's basically stating that there is an idol out there. So I could be clocking somebody's game. Maybe they're lying, saying that they have the idol, the merge idol, and that's me, taking away that opportunity for someone to lie about it. So that was the first moment that you guys knew that the idol wasn't found anymore. Like it's still out there, and that was like this regeneration in your minds. Like, okay, now we need to start looking for it. But nobody really looked after that challenge, which I was surprised about. Nobody really looked. They just said, okay, well, we'll get to it after this tribal council. So everybody let TJ go. They did the challenge. And then it was like, okay, we'll wait for the clue and we'll start looking, which I thought was fascinating because it's like, well, I mean, he kind of just admitted that there is an idol out there. Let's start looking now would have been my thought. But everybody was more focused on surviving the vote. And I understand that for your part because you were in that sort of situation where you needed to survive the vote. But like Jack, Sarah, Alejandro, Davey, I feel like they should have said, okay, you guys figure out who's voting for whom. I'm going to go look for this idol because it's definitely out there. But nobody did that.
Yeah, we must have thought in the moment that someone had it. And just a PSA, because you reminded me of that challenge where we could drop out. Anybody who's playing season 5, if they're doing that Nicaragua-esque tension thing, go on Amazon right now, buy yourself a little resistance band and train up those like tiny little muscles in your back because it looks easy. That shit burns after like probably like 45 seconds. And like you would think that would be like an easy thing to do. That was very difficult. And that's part of the reason I dropped was I looked around and was like, I'm not winning this thing. And so I might as well just hope that I'm still here next round. But yeah, you can train up for that. And you should because it'll probably
Is Sarah still in the chat? Is that a hard challenge to try and win?
Yes, or Kai, less so. And Alex, Brian told Bennett that he made a huge mistake voting out Matt, and Bennett cursed him out, so he's gone.
Yeah,
Brian had to.
Really sorry.
Well, Bennett, what I loved is that you really took, in the end, a hold of the game like nobody else kind of did. And I think you said, like, I'm not going to go down without a fight. And that's what Chris always kind of does when he asks, like, hey, does anybody else have anything they want to say? It really is to give people the opportunity to, like, go down swinging. And I always admire that about you in this game is that you were like, I refuse to just kind of be passive and maybe hope that they won't vote me out. Now, to be fair to you, Kai won immunity, so it wasn't like it was potentially somebody else. But I always appreciated that because you like made sure that you weren't going down without a fight. And I don't know who to trust. Kai says that the challenge is not hard at all, and Davey says it was so hard.
So hard.
Kai, not all of us can be D1 athletes, so see you later.
I think it's hard for some people until when you have to look up. That's the most challenging part because you really have no sense of balance and control after that moment. And that's when you kind of see like Sarah go from like stoic and like perfect to like she just loses it.
I mean, I didn't even make it to that part and I was still dying. So I stand by. That was a difficult challenge.
Yeah.
I want you to make it to the merge, Dresden.
We love you, Dresden.
We all love Dresden.
I know. Well,
let's get into that tomorrow, Alex. Okay, come on.
We'll get there. But also, Bennett, I have to say, let us not forget, you came in second place in our sequester mini, which I always loved. I thought it was so fun. You were robbed so early, and then you came back, and I love just getting to watch you in like a purely nobody can vote you out for being a comp beast in sequester. Like that's just not possible. How was that for you? Like getting to play with everybody in that environment because Liska wins, but you came in second. I thought you played a great game around that.
I mean, props to anyone who plays sequester frequently because I was exhausted afterwards. It is so chaotic, and looking back on it too, I just felt like my survivor brain was on, and so when I got brought back, I was like, I'm never gonna win. And then afterwards, people were like, you should have given yourself a little bit more credit and like basically like pitched yourself a little bit better. And then realistically, I think Dresden and I probably should have been the final two because everyone loves Liska and she had played like a very masterful game that night. So Liska very much deserved every single vote that she had, and she whooped my ass at the last two. But if I could do it all over again, I probably would have maybe taken a little more seriously after re-entering. But I'm like the survivor purist in me is like Redemption Island and those bring back things. I'm like, I don't know. I just don't think it has the same. You don't have the same like resume, I guess, to win at the end, in my opinion. And so that's kind of also my downfall. My game also just wasn't great. So Liska deserved the win.
Oh, I thought you did a great job. Avoiding getting dragged by Dresden, I have to say, is a very big accomplishment. I think. Chris, is there anything else that we need to talk about? We're about 2 minutes away from beating the Billy podcast time, I have to say. That's a shame, Billy.
So in your final words, you said that you would definitely do this again. Like, is that a plan for you? Like, you want to do these, like more of these, or are you kind of like, okay, I did this, and it's in the past for me?
Yeah, I think. I mean, like, listen, if you guys are ever doing like an all-star or a second chance, I'm back for Survivor New York in a second. I think I've seen some of the other ones online, and like, I feel like I'm spoiled a bit in that this was my first one because I think the caliber at which you guys like developed this and the amount of passion you put into it and like the level of gameplay we experienced this season with the cast was just so good that it would be difficult for me to find another one that I think was on that same level. And so it really depends. Maybe there's one in the future that I might be doing. We'll have to see. But the short answer is yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say that I think of myself as an all-star player, but if you guys do a second chance, I would like to at least be on the list for potential callbacks at some point. Would love to do it. So you let me know.
Sure. Well, Bennett, do you have a favorite memory overall? Like, is there something that stands out from the experience that you're like, this was my favorite part of the whole game?
Yeah, I think my favorite part just has to be, because I remember Louis told me something similar. I don't know if this was his favorite part per se, but when he had told me about it, he was like, and all of a sudden they were like, okay, go. And you walk into this like beach and like Chris, Lord and Savior, Jeffrey Probstfeld.
Oh my God.
Is standing there and does like the whole welcome to Survivor thing. And as somebody who would like applies every year, I think I'm on casting's blacklist at this point, but like it does in a way, it scratches that itch in a way that I never anticipated. And I think even like in the moment after it all wraps, you're super exhausted and then you like do the what if, whatever, and then it kind of fades. And then all of a sudden we watched it back now and all of a sudden it's back. And like, I think just watching the opening again, feeling that sort of like butterfly sort of excitement was something that like, you just don't like, you're like, am I going to be the first one out? Like, I don't think at no point felt like I was going to win. Even going into it, I was like, I'm not going to win, but I hope to do well. But yeah, I think just the opening of the whole thing was just everyone felt a little electric in that moment. And that's one thing that I think I would never forget. There are many others, but I think that one really stands out. Just the opening of the whole thing was like, oh, this is legit. Like we're here to play. So
I love that. And I have to say, I always loved that Louis was always kind of like, not necessarily your tribe handler in the beginning, but I love that Louis always seemed to get the best confessionals out of you. And I love that when you're giving a confessional to Louis, it really just feels like you're talking to him, which is like where the iconic like complaining about the people trying to sleep confessional comes from, because you're just talking to your friend and you're talking shit. And then like, it's also a confessional. That was Louis is so fun. And like, it's such a blast to have him on the crew, and it's because like he can talk to you guys and get these really hilarious confessionals out of you. They're, like even in the swap, like there's a lot of really great content from you two. It's like I like almost it's like you just want to see you play together. Like I feel like I kind of want that because you understand each other so well clearly.
Yeah, that would be so.
Oh my God!
You guys should just start getting more people's friends for crew. You're gonna get.
I think so. It'd be really fun. One last thing I think I want to bring up is I'm editing the finale, so I had heard that there were maybe people that were in the game, in the finale, people on the jury that were imitating me and imitating Naomi. Can you do your best?
Or is this just rumors, Chris?
This is true, but I don't have it on footage. Can you imitate Naomi and me?
I don't know that I can on the spot. And honestly, like what I will say is Naomi was like, guys, you're not supposed to drink on jury, and there were White Claws in the fridge. And like,
I let you have one White Claw, and then you drink more.
You let me have one White Claw to help myself to 4. So like I don't really remember a lot of it, but Chris, maybe what we can do is we can get everyone together for like a reunion party, and I'll freshen up my imitations for then. I also feel like I should have your hat on. I need like the full experience.
Sunglasses, yeah. I got it. Oh God, I'm scared now. So I'm very scared.
All from a place of love, I promise you. And I've said this 5 times, but just like thank you guys so much for like putting so much effort into this, and it's been like so much fun to watch back. And it's like Billy said the other night, I think so many of us have made like connections that we will talk to for life and be close with for life. And so really, really appreciate it. And it has helped scratch the Survivor itch as somebody who's been watching since season 1. So very much appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, we're so glad that you came out and played. I feel like I remember talking to you in the casting moment and I was like, absolutely needs to happen. And like, it's like a good sign when we're like, I mean, they know each other, but we should cast both of them. Like we kind of need to have them both. Oh, Marilyn, a reunion party would be great. Okay, we'll talk about it. We should do that. That would be going.
We really should. I mean,
yes, sweet message from Davey. He
I knew
kissed
he
your
kissed
vote.
my vote.
Should have got you some like lipstick to do like a drag race, but not like goodbye.
oh my god, that would have been so funny.
We should do that. We should put a mirror
Oh
in
my
the
god,
backyard.
go
and
in my
make them write
bathroom. No, go in my bathroom and write their goodbyes.
You should let all the jury
In the
members
shower.
in the bathroom.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Yes. Well, I can't wait for the next few episodes. So just to recap, here's the schedule. We have a new episode on Friday. And then after that, we have the podcast on Wednesday, the 11th, with the eliminated player. But before all of that, tomorrow is the Kai interview with Chris's good friend and one of the Doubt Live players, Thomas. We're so excited. Thomas told me about something he is doing for the I can't wait for you guys to see it. So you need to tune in live for that tomorrow night at 9 p.m. And Bennett, thank you for being here. The finale, where you can see Bennett ask a great jury question, will be on what day is that, Chris? 2 Fridays from now?
Friday the 13th. I have to
Ooh.
add. Friday, August 13th is
Friday
the finale.
So the
13th.
finale is what? Is that
The final 6 onward.
Got it.
The final 6 onward.
And are we getting? You're gonna yell at me for this, but are we getting like any tease of what season 5 is at the finale or no?
No, because season
No.
5 will not have filmed. But what we will do is once season 5 has occurred, I will definitely post the cast for everybody to see. Whether or not, we're not going to reveal anything, just who played, and then maybe some details. But
No,
unfortunately,
honestly, though, I was thinking, Naomi, I'm going to make a promo. I'm going to take some clips, and maybe like the week or so after, I'll at least give them like a 1-minute promo, and that's it.
We'll drop a little hint.
We'll talk about that.
It's like just too before, so we can't tease it.
Yeah.
Like, thanks pandemic, but we can't tease anything because it didn't happen yet. But and everyone is sending their love to you, and I think it's totally deserved, Bennett. You were so fun. And what I love is that you both brought a lot of intensity in a great way, but then at the end, you always knew that it was about having fun. And I love that in a player, that that at the end of the day, we're just here to play Survivor for no money. And that's just kind of how it is. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you're here for tomorrow's episode with Kai. Will we go another hour and a half? Who knows? But beyond that, have a good night. Stay safe. And we will see you